Hello, this is week 3 of my video blog, and this week's viewer request is the fingerless gloves. You can see a couple set up in the background. This is an up-close view of one. As you can see, the shape does taper so it fits your hand very nicely. Now, the items you will need to do this project will be the 26 peg long loom, which is actually the shortest in the long loom set. If you do not have that one, if you any long loom or even the S-shaped looms that you have, you can use. You're only going to be working on 26 pegs of it. You will also, this does require a loom adjuster. I do not have the Pratt ones, but Pratt does have a loom adjuster as well. It only works with one type of loom set, so you have to have a specific loom set, which I believe it's actually this one right here that I'm showing. You have to have a specific loom set for the Pratt loom adjuster to work with it, and those ones you can typically get at Walmart for, I think they're about $4 for a set of 2. Mine, I sell them online as $10 a set. You will need a way to count your rows. This is the row counter that I use. I really like it because it has a string for a necklace, and it also has a lock on it, which is very nice when you have kids. Of course, you will need your loom tool. You will also need a crochet hook, pair of scissors, and a tensioner. You don't have to use a tensioner. I use a tensioner on everything I do. And what that is something that you put over the string. When you work with it, keeps your tension even. These, you can actually buy tensioners. These are, I got in just the arts and crafts section, I think at Walmart. They were crowns. You can see the shape where the crown had a thing at the end where it actually twists the crown out, and then you can twist it back up in. So I just took the crowns out, popped the back off, and these make absolutely wonderful tensioners because they're big, so it's hitting here and here instead of a lot of your tensioners are about this big, and this is just the ones I like to use. Okay, how to set up your loom. As you can see, this loom, a lot of my looms I've had for years and years and years, and every once in a while you will lose a peg, so they end up filled with different colored pegs. Now, for this project, peg 1, I don't count peg 1 as one of the end pegs like a normal project would. You count 4 pegs down and replace a peg. This right here, this yellow peg on this one, is peg 1. And you will see why I do that in a moment. But I will take a moment to say, I am left-handed, so this is my peg 1. If you're right-handed and you're more comfortable working in the opposite direction than I do, you can use this as your peg 1. Or you can even go down here, use this or this, as long as it is the 4th peg down from the end. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be any of those. It's really up to you, and it doesn't make any difference. You just follow the pattern normal, just following where your peg 1 is, 1, 2, 3, it goes like that. So if you're over here, this will be 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Okay, so there's your loom. First thing you're going to do, you'll get your loom adjuster, which if you have one of these ones, between, right past peg 1 and the very last peg, I'll look up the numbers in a little bit. You hook your loom adjuster. If you have the Pratt one, it'll just snap in place. So this is your basic setup. Now from here, you will do a chain cast on, starting with the peg that's in the adjuster, going to peg 1 all the way around, and your last loop will go back on this peg. Now if you do not know how to do the chain cast on, there's a link to do that in the there's a link in the description below to my video showing you how to do the chain cast on. Other stitches that you will need to know for this video is you will need to know your E-wrap, your purl stitch, and you'll also need to know the super stretchy cast off. I'm not going to stop and show you how to do each of these throughout the video because I do have other videos to show you how to do those. So if you don't know how to do those, you might want to actually go down to the description now, watch the video, and get familiar with all those stitches, and then come back to this video and you can just loom right along with the video, or you can watch the video entirely through. That is Dexter. And then come back and then try your project. Dexter, what are you doing, buddy? It's definitely not what everybody wants to see in the shot. Okay, so as I was saying, you do your chain cast on for your very first part. You do your chain cast on this section, whichever your peg 1 is. When you start your cast ons for this, because there's going to be a couple of them, because what you're going to do first is the part where all the fingers come through, and then we'll do the thumb part, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do the rest. Alright, looks like Dexter's getting comfortable back there. So like I said, chain cast on, start with the peg in the loom adjuster, go to your peg 1, whichever way you're going, go all the way around that last loop, put on that peg. Now your row 1, with just this circle, you E-wrap your row 1. The first 5 rows are going to actually be done in the garter stitch, so row 1 is E-wrapped, and we're only using this circle right here that you just cast on. Row 2 is a purl stitch, row 3 is an E-wrap, row 4 is a purl stitch, and row 5 is an E-wrap. That combination actually creates a garter stitch, which is this fluffy part at the top, and it's also what keeps it from curling. When you get done with that, when you're done with that garter stitch, then the rest of this project is actually knitted inside out. So when it's on the loom done, it's going to look like this. This is not the stockinette stitch. This project is done using mainly the purl stitch. It's very tight, and it's also very stretchy, and it's just a really nice stitch to use. So we've got row 1 through 5 done in the garter stitch. Row 6 through 10 is still in the same spot, but you're only doing the purl stitch. After row 10, cut a length of string, about 5 inches long or so, because you'll need to weave that through later. Then you want to take the loop that is on the loom adjuster peg, whether it's this one or the Provocraft, whatever adjuster you're using, and either move it doesn't matter which peg, but you want to either move it to peg 1, whichever peg 1 is yours, or the other peg, as long as it's back on this working, the ones that already have stitches on them. Don't move it over here, move them over here. When you're done with that, this is what it's going to look like. Now, since it is done in a purl stitch, it's going to want to flip up through. That is fine, you're not doing anything wrong, but as you can see, I left a good length of string, and right now you're going to have 2 strings. This is from your cast on, and this is from where you just cut off. See, as you can see, I put the extra peg, the extra loop on this peg over here. So the next time, after we do the thumb and you start going all the way around, when you see the 2 loops on that peg, don't worry about it, you treat them as one. Now, from here, with this loom, let me take this off here for a minute and just show you. With this loom adjuster, the slit is on both sides, so you do not have to take it and flip it backwards. If you're using the Provocraft loom adjuster, at this point you'll want to take it out, flip it backwards, and put it right in the exact same spot. And again, you're going to do a chain cast on, but this time we're only using this circle right here. So just these pegs right here. Was it 8 pegs? Yeah. And again, you will start with the peg in the middle of the loom adjuster, and then you can go whichever way is more comfortable for you. It does not make a difference, but let's say we go this way. That last loop again will go on that loom adjuster. If not, you're going to have an empty spot as you work through the project. And the cat has found the yarn, and you don't want that empty spot, so you do want this to connect as a complete circle. And remember, there will be 2 loops on this peg when you go about the next step, and you treat those as one. Anytime there's a situation like that through this project, which does happen a few times, where you have to move pegs, move string from one peg to the next, you always treat the string as just one. So we've got the cast on right here, again the chain cast on. We're going to do 5 rows of the garter stitch again. So whichever way you're going, row 1, you will E-wrap. Row 2, you will purl. Row 3, you will E-wrap. Row 4, you will purl. And row 5, you will E-wrap again. Now at this point, you don't cut the yarn, but you will take the yarn off of this peg, and you can move it to either this peg or this peg, as long as it's on this part, the thumb that you just made. Again, do not cut the yarn. It doesn't matter. Typically what I will do is whatever side I put it on with this part, I will use the opposite side. So I would have had the double strands right here instead of over here, because then sometimes as you, and this is going to be right in here, so it's really not that noticeable, but you might have like a couple bulkier stitches on that side than you would that side, and that just helps to even it out a bit more. Okay, so you've got your finger hole and you got your thumb hole. At this point, we don't need the loom adjuster for a while. I have lost my hook. Here it is. We don't need the loom adjuster for a while. You can just take your loom adjuster off, whichever loom adjuster you're using, and you will have an opening in the middle here. You will have your thumb here, you'll have your thumb here, and you have the rest here, and there'll be a hole in the middle here. Now at this point, your yarn, whichever peg you use as peg 1, your yarn should be coming off the peg right before it. This is why this peg is here, and it's why this peg is marked, so that every time you come around, you get to this peg, you click another row. Because right now, this is when we get into just a straight purl stitch. So from here, you go to your peg 1, you purl stitch all the way around. Every single one, you're going to come to a couple double stitches here, a couple double stitches here, treat them as one, but you're doing a continuous circle. You're ignoring everything else going on. You do 10 rows of just the purl stitch right here. Remember, this is your peg 1. So 10 rows. When you get done with that, this is what it's going to look like. I'll hold it the same way. This is what it's going to look like when you get the 10 purl rows done. See, you can see it's starting to form, and you can start seeing everything. Here's where the fingers will go through. Here's where the thumb will go through. This is where the string is left right before your peg 1. This is probably the part you need to pay the most attention to in this video, because this is where we go. Now we have done, let me hold it like this. You've done your garter stitch, you've done your 5 rows, you've cut the string, you've switched over here, done 5 rows of garter stitch, then you've went through the whole loom and done 10 rows of purl stitch. Now we need to create this. And to do this, it's where your loom adjuster will have to come back and play. And what you want to do, I keep sitting take your loom hook, pull the string off, just hold it down like that. If you're using the ProvoCraft one, just snap it in place. If you're using the Ultimate one, you can just put the elastics on and it'll stay right there. At this point, you take that string, put it back on. So you have taken the loop from the peg on the end closest to your peg 1. You don't want to do this end, because then you'll have the back side of the glove curving in. So all of this is worked on this side of the loom where the thumb is. So you've taken that end peg and moved it to this. But now we need to take the one from that peg and put it there. The one from this peg, oops, and move it there. So as you can see, you're going to have 3 empty pegs on this side. This one will have 2 stitches on it, and this one will as well, but you will be treating them as one. at this point, what you'll do, and of course if you're using this type of adjuster, if it's more comfortable, you can just take the elastics and do this. You don't have to take this adjuster off at all through this process. You just pull the elastics over. If it's a ProvoCraft loom, the ProvoCraft adjuster, you will have to remove the adjuster during each of these steps. Okay, so for our decrease, this is where we're at. We have 3 empty pegs here. There are 2 stitches on both of these pegs. We are still doing the purl stitch, and you start with your peg 1, go all the way around, just the pegs that have yarn on them. You are not going to be doing anything else the rest of this loom, the rest of this project with these 3 pegs right here. So you'll do your row 1, which this peg and this peg will have double stitches on them. That's perfectly fine. It's how it's supposed to be. And then you're going to do a second row. That second row, these will only have 1 stitch on each. When you are back to your peg 1 after row 2, we are going to move these down again. And every time we decrease, all we do is take, every time you decrease, you take from the last peg that has yarn on it. You're not going to mess with this one anymore. You're going to take from that last peg and move it up 1. And then you're going to purl all the way around 2 times. And we're doing that until we get to back to our peg 1. Which I'm not going to actually stick that on there because I will finish this glove up later. Oops. And I don't want to get myself confused. But what's going to happen, you just remember 2 rows each time, move it down. 2 rows, move it down. And you will do that until you get back to your starter peg. And what that will look like when you get to that point, well, what that will look like when you get to that point is it'll look like this. You'll have, which that doesn't need to be there. You'll have 7 empty pegs on this side, which, remember, it's the side you've done your thumb on. That is perfectly fine. It's how it's supposed to look. And then you will have, this is your purl stitch. This is what the inside of it looks like. This is what the outside of it looks like. And of course, I've already done the next step on this one. You will barely be able to see, it'll be down about here. You'll barely be able to see the decrease when you look at that step. But what you do from here is when you're back down to this, you're going to do 15 rows of just the purl stitch, and that's going to create this right here. And that's what it will look like. And remember, of course, you start from your peg 1, go all the way around, and you do 15 rows. Now at this point, the only thing you have left to do is this bottom part, and all this is the last 5 rows of your project. You do that garter stitch again. So it'll be purl, well, E-wrap, purl, E-wrap, purl, E-wrap. And then you do your chain cast, do your super stretchy cast off, which is going to give a nice stretchy end to it, but it's also going to keep its shape very nicely. And then your project is done. Now a couple troubleshooting issues here. What happens if you're halfway through your project and you need to add more yarn? Let me adjust this down so that you'll be able to see this better. Okay, so we need to add more yarn. Of course, I've got my tensioner on it. This one, the yarn actually ended here, and this is row, the last row right before I start the E-wrap and the purl. And anytime if you are running short on yarn, you're just going to try to make it through. Just if you need to add yarn, add yarn. It's not that hard. It's really easy to blend it in. But what we want to do, this is our yarn coming from our spool, which this one, I'll show you this is Premier Yarns, the Deborah Norville collection, Serenity chunky weight yarn. This one is actually, let me find the color of it, Pink Candy. 1 spool will make 1 set of gloves, and you'll actually have enough to make almost a 3rd glove. So 2 spools of this will make about almost 3 sets. Okay, so we've got the yarn coming from the spool. This is our yarn that's ended. We hold both of the yarns together, treat them as one. And we're going to do this for at least 3 stitches. Again, we were doing our purl stitch. That's where we're at. Let me kind of twist these together and make this a little easier. Oops, I dropped it. Okay. Sorry, my bracelet's hitting the table. Okay, so there we go. Purl, both of those are just on there as one, and then that first stitch is the most awkward. You want to tighten that up, and then you do your second, and then you do a third just for good measure. On any project, this is a great way to start a new row, start a new skein of yarn, because if you do at least 3 stitches, you can do as many as you want. That will lock that in there. And then when I have my ends, I take the ends and pull down this way, just so it's out of my way. When you're done, you'll take your crochet hook and kind of weave all of that in there. Okay. When you take, sorry, when you take this off the loom after you do your super stretchy cast off, which I'll do kind of a close-up of how it's going to look, this is what your project's going to look like. If you don't have to add any extra yarn, you will have 3 strings. Let me move this up again so I get a little better lighting. You will have 3 strings coming off this end. You'll have just 1 string coming off this end. That's if you don't have to add any more. At this point, you'll take your crochet hook. There are a bunch of different ways. See, there's going to be a hole right here you're going to have to stitch up. In this, you can do whatever way is comfortable for you. But what I like to do is I take the crochet hook, I weave this through. Oh, sorry. And when you are weaving excess yarn through, you don't want to do it exactly in a straight line. You want to skip pegs, you want to go over this way, you want to go that way. And this string, I'm just getting it out of the way because these are the 2 we're going to work with to sew that hole up. And typically what I do is I bring it down a few rows, and you can feel what I'm weaving it into is that last row of the purl stitch, the last row of the garter stitch on the inside. But you take this off the loom, it's inside out, so you don't have to flip it out and then weave all these in. See, I just weave it through a ways. It doesn't really matter, you know, just as long as you got it going in there pretty good, then you can take and cut the string off, and you can barely tell it's even there. Now with the thumb, I'll kind of show you how I work this. And of course you'll do that with this end too. You'll just weave it up a bit, and then I usually weave it over about where that first E-wrap row is of the garter stitch. I've noticed I don't see any type of indentation or anything on the other side when I do it that way, because that garter stitch really hides it. Okay, so here we are. Just got to remember to keep this in the view of the camera. Well, you can't see, you'll have a, oops. If you're not paying attention, you will get your hook. Alright, I accidentally pulled it through 2 hoops. Okay, so there we go. That is on this end of the hole, and this one is on this end of the hole. And I've just kind of came up with this by myself. There may be a better way to do this, but I just weave it back and forth from side to side. Which, if you know how to fill this in, you can fast forward this part because it's looking pretty awkward on my half of this anyway. And you just want to make sure as you're weaving it back and forth that you're not leaving any holes. You want it to be filled in pretty good, which I typically will weave it all the way to the other side. Then I flip it around and I take the other string and I weave it through. and I try to weave it through different stitches than what I did with the first one. And then I try to check it. I was like, I've got a slightly thin spot over here, so you pick up, just pull it through, and that's actually looking pretty good. So at this point we want both of these strings on the same side, because if this comes undone, that's pretty bad. You don't really want that to come undone. So what I do is I weave it through to where that hole is filled in, and then I take both strings on the same side. I'm going to lean this on the cat. I just do a quick, just one looped little knot there, because if you make a big knot, then you'll be able to feel it. So I'll do a tiny knot, and then I weave this for a good bit. So it's going to take a lot for this to unravel, I mean. So I weave it through, and lots of times I will try to, I don't even see where okay, it's on this side. Lots of times I will try to weave everything on the same side. You don't have to, it doesn't really make much of a difference, only if down the road through washing and use you end up with some frayed yarn ends showing. But if that happens, you just take your crochet hook and just pull them right back through. Okay, so I think that'll be good enough for that side, so we can cut it off. And so let's do this side. And again, we will weave it through a few. Oops. Yes, if this was, I'm trying to hold it up in the air so you can see it better, which I don't think I'm really accomplishing that too well. So I typically do not appear this awkward as I knit. I am awkward, but not quite this awkward. Okay. Oh, I see what I did. Okay, I just want to pick up one and pull that through. I'll say that's good. We'll cut that. Now we have this end to do. And to do these gloves, to do one glove, it takes me roughly an hour and a half to do one glove. We'll say 2 hours with if you're just starting out doing the gloves. Give yourself 2 hours per glove. So it should take you roughly 4 hours to do a set. When it comes to yarn selection, try to pick a super bulky yarn that is completely washable and dryable, because these are gloves, they're on your hands, they're going to get dirty. Yarns I prefer, I like homespun yarn. That's what this set is started out of. And I like the Deborah Norville. There's another company who makes a yarn that's almost exactly the same as this. It just has a different label on it pretty much. Actually, it's this stuff right here. Nope, that's Deborah Norville too. I don't have any to show you, but it's almost the same as this. This is a very soft yarn. Completely washable. I throw them in the washer, I throw them in the dryer, and I've never had any problem with that. Okay. Alright, so here we go. We have all the ends stitched in. And now to see what the finished product looks like. I'm going to flip it inside out and flip the thumb. There you go. And see how the Deborah Norville yarn kind of stripes. It's a beautiful, beautiful yarn. And there you go. Now you can do these as long as you want. Just when you get to the last 5 rows, do your garter stitch. The reason I do these ones, I came up with this length simply because I use my row counter and I count continuously from row 1, row 1 to 10 here, 1 to 5, so that's 15. There's 10 here, so that puts me down to 25 before I do the indent. After the indent, that puts me on row 30. 15 more, it puts me at row 45. The last 5, I have 50 even rows, and that's a nice even number. It makes it a very nice size. But you, as I said, you can make them as long or as short as you want. Just make sure you do your garter stitch in. It really pulls it all together. Okay, I believe I have went over everything. Oh, I do want to show you my Yeti ones. You can do these out of eyelash yarn. It makes it look like a Yeti glove. This is my Yeti glove. Other things you can do that are fun. You can do duplicate stitch over top of the gloves with this set that I did. If you're wearing both gloves, let's see if I can show you. If you're wearing both gloves at the same time, it matches up to where you can hold them together and you see the ribbon. But the ribbon does go all the way through, and this is just a pattern. I did a Google search for breast cancer ribbon knitting patterns or something like that, and it graphed out for me. I am still working on perfecting the duplicate stitch. As you can see, there are some empty spots in this, but I do feel for patterns like this, the duplicate stitch is your best route to go, so you don't have a bunch of loose threads inside of the gloves, because the gloves are going to be stretched and used quite a bit, so you want them to be very nice and even. Now if you want to do a matching hat, you can do a fully garter stitch hat. Looks really nice with this set, or you can do a garter stitch hat with a pearl top, kind of miniaturized version of what it'll look like. That'll match with it well as well. Okay, everybody, I do hope you're able to make heads and tails of this video. I only had really one take to get this whole thing done. Thank you so much for watching, and do not forget to comment below with what you want next week's video to be about. Alright, thank you.